2, 3, 4. Do 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 do. Do 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 do. Oh, look at this! I got a new laptop, and I can't tell if it looks good or not. Do I look great or what? Do I look good enough for Pixel of the Week? Oh, I have got a mighty headache, so let's get this over with. Pretty big week, and actually, in fact, today I had to kind of split. I'll get the rest tomorrow, but I got all the Marvel stuff today because I know how to prioritize. First up is Black Widow number 14. It's been a while since an issue's come out, or so it seems, and it's also the triumphant return of Elena Casagrande on art, and she's become one of my favorite artists of late, so I'm looking forward to reading that. I'm now trying to remember what the last... It wasn't that long ago, I don't think, but it always seems that way when Casagrande... And that happens a lot on this book. I get the impression that she's on the slower side, so they have fill-in artists. But I don't mind, because usually the fill-in artists are pretty good, too. And also, when the art's that good, I'm willing to wait for it. Here's the big one I'm excited for. Ghost Rider number 1. Hooray! It's the return of Johnny Blaze, although this is a very Danny Ketch motorcycle. Benjamin Percy's writing it, and, I enjoy his work so far, mostly, and I'm trying to see who the artist is without blowing it for myself. Corey Smith, whose name rings a bell, but I couldn't tell you from where. It's an oversized issue, and I'm very excited to have a monthly Ghost Rider title back. Oh, and it's Legacy number 247, which means issue number 4 will be also oversized, because that'll be the 250th issue. So yeah, I don't know a whole lot. This was also my pick for the shop for this week. All I do know is that Johnny Blaze is back, and a lot of old farts are very happy about that. Robbie Reyes as the Ghost Rider is perfectly fine. I enjoy that character on the Avengers and in the pages of that book, and also in Avengers Forever. But when they first introduced him as the new Ghost Rider in 2013 or 14, somewhere around there, just didn't much care for it. I don't remember who was the creative team or anything. There was a lot of big changes where instead of a motorcycle, he drove like a Dodge Charger, I want to say, some sort of souped up hot rod like that sort of a thing. And I mean, the character himself, he's from Los Angeles, he's a Mexican American, and I think he's from the bad part of town. And I got no problem with that. Diversification is still fine by me. But at the same time, I'm still going to prefer... I mean, technically, Johnny Blaze wasn't my Ghost Rider. Danny Ketch was my Ghost Rider because he was the one in the 90s, which is what I got super into. I mean, Blaze was around, but he wasn't Ghost Rider. Picks of the week. And now picks of last week. Oh, we might get out of here under 10 minutes. When I first started this thing, that was my goal, was to not do more than 10 minutes. Because I was doing it for the comic shop that I used to work for. And I didn't want to... Also, frankly, who needs it? But then, yeah, I mean, obviously I've let that slide. So first up is Iron Fist number 1. So it turns out this is Swordmaster, which I did know actually going into this, but it wasn't until I started reading it that I went, oh, right. So there was there was a big push by Marvel just a couple of years ago, I want to say right before the pandemic. Possibly even this was going on when the pandemic started. But they were really making a push to have more Asian characters. And I don't think it was even like a diversity hire thing, because as I recall, the real like white liberal guilt started to sink in on that well into the pandemic. But Greg Pak, who is, I believe, Korean American, had been writing for Marvel for years, still is, I believe. Oh, I think it's just Darth Vader. I think he's not doing any current Marvel books that I can think of. Great writer though, and he wrote the Hulk for years and years. Great run on that book. He wrote World War Hulk and a lot of that, all the Planet Hulk stuff, all the stuff, all the Hulk stuff that ended up in Ragnarok. That was all Greg Pak. Thor Ragnarok. And he also brought back the Agents of Atlas, which was a team from the 50s. Or not a team from the 50s. It was a team of characters from the 50s, led by Jimmy Woo, who was one of the first Asian American comic book Marvel characters anyway. He wasn't a superhero. He's not superpowered, but he was top flight agent. Like he was the hero. And I think he fought Fu Manchu a lot. But yeah, Jimmy Woo was always A-okay. So in Agents of Atlas, which were... That book, when it came back in the aughts, was written by Jeff Parker, who's still one of my favorites. And that book was tremendous. I loved it. Because it's Jimmy Woo, Gorilla Man, Marvel Boy, like a bunch of like a Venus, a bunch of 50s characters who never... They were in Marvel Comics in the 50s, but they never really carried over. I think a couple, I want to say like Namora. Yeah, Namora definitely did carry over into Silver Age and beyond, but most of those characters were by the boards, and Jeff Parker really gave it the 50s vibe that made it really fun. And then I think once he left, they kind of just shelved it, but then Greg Pak brought it back, and Jimmy Woo was still a leader, but all the other characters were now Asian characters, and a lot of them were created for that Agents of Atlas team. And then they called it Atlantis Attacks, which was a reference to another Marvel event from 1988, 89. And the new Atlantis Attacks had very little to do with the old one. But they were really... Pak and... I want to say... I'm hoping it's Greg Pak. I'll correct myself in the comments. Because Gene Luen Yang also wrote a lot of these. And I liked his work. He's Chinese. I think he might actually be from China. I should probably check these sorts of things. I could also look on my phone. I also have a new computer to look these sorts of things up on. I just kind of want to get to the end of this, though, because I'm already going on for far too long. So, between Pak and Yang both, they created a bunch of Asian characters. White Fox, I think, had already been a character, but Swordmaster, I believe, was new. I think Silk is... See, now I'm having trouble remembering. I bought all these books. I'm a big fan of both those writers. Yang had never really written for Marvel before, but he had written New Superman for DC, which was an all-Chinese Superman book, and I loved it. It was so much fun. And so, yeah. When they brought Yang over, like, hey, help us, Asian the place up a bit. And he did, and they created it. I believe Swordmaster is a creation of his. And that was the book that I, in particular, was... that. Like, I bought all of them, and they were all... That's not that good. I mean, sometimes that happens. Swordmaster was the one I stuck with the longest because Shang-Chi was also in that book, and he's my favorite. So... But even that, it was after a while, it's just like, yeah, this stuff's just not good. And I really feel like it was one of those things of too much, too soon, sort of, where they were like, we're going to create a whole new, like, sort of wing of the Marvel Universe. Don't make that into a racist thing. We're going to create a new Wang Chung of the Marvel Universe. And, I mean, hats off. I don't need to wear this. It's not that cold in here. But it just didn't... The execution didn't... A for effort, but yeah, it just didn't do great. So now that they wanted to make Iron Fist an actual Asian guy, they used Swordmaster. And Swordmaster's sword got destroyed, I believe, in that Atlantis Attacks thing. So now he has the chi. And he does run into Danny Rand in this. And Danny Rand's like, oh, well, I can help you with this because I was Iron Fist for a long time. And then he was like, screw you, old man. It was still good. So yeah, that's a good one. I'm looking forward to the rest of that. I also had The Lion and the Eagle #1. This is, I think, going to be a 2 or 3 issue miniseries. It's very standard Garth Ennis war stuff. And a lot of this is just setting up the rest of the story. Because what you have when you have a Garth Ennis war book, generally speaking, is he introduces you to your POV characters, who usually are very sympathetic British officers in World War II. Especially, well, not especially in this one, but especially in the Air Force ones that he does, the Royal Air Force stories. But this is about on the ground in Burma. So our main cast here were part of the retreat of the Allied forces through Burma, which was brutal. And to be honest with you, I don't know as much about World War II as I probably could. Most of what I know is from Garth Ennis. So, but they have to go back into the jungle and kill as many Japanese soldiers as they can. So the next issues promise to be rather violent, which I'm all for. Then also this week, I hurt my leg last Friday, so I've just been laid up and reading a lot. But I haven't finished a whole lot because I've got like 20 things going at once. But I did read this. This is The Flash by Mark Waid, Volume 1. This is all, obviously, his earliest work on The Flash from the early 90s, from 1990, if I'm not very much mistaken. Mark Waid has been one of my favorite writers for a long time, but I didn't really get into him until the late aughts, early teens, I want to say. But because he had been largely a DC guy, and I just wasn't reading that much DC stuff. The Flash became his signature book. This is what the book that really made him. I think he'd been writing for a little while before this, but this was and it's great. It's really fun stuff. And it's the same thing. I think I've noticed this more. Okay. There's a certain thing about DC superheroes, especially this is from my childhood. This was when I was hardcore comic book collector, but also hardcore anti-DC, so I didn't read any of this stuff. But since I'm not invested in it from my childhood, I can just read it, and I don't know really who any. I mean, I know who Wally West is. I know like the kind of bare essentials of the Flash. I just don't know all of it. Some of it's not great, I'll say that too. And early 90s superhero comics are pretty bad all around. I think DC is definitely worse, but again, that's just me showing my prejudices. So yeah, there's like at least 8 volumes, if not more, of this, and I'm like, I can't start buying all these when I got a whole closet full of books I haven't read yet. So this is good. I'm glad to have read it, and then once I kind of get my to-read stack down into at least somewhat more reasonable amounts, then I can get back in. I can tuck back into these. But yeah, if you haven't read any of Wade's stuff, this would be a perfect place to start. Frankly, I started with his Fantastic Four run, which is also a very good place to start. No, that's not even true. What I started on Mark Waid, and I think I've made mention of it, was in his book called Irredeemable, which had a kind of a sister book called Incorruptible, and both of those. Irredeemable was essentially, he wanted to do a Superman story where Superman loses it. And DC would have, of course, never let. Like, Alan Moore had a similar thing with Supreme. Supreme was a real two-dimensional character created by Rob Liefeld, because that's what he does. And Alan Moore used that character to tell the Superman stories they never let him tell. And Mark Waid did the same thing with Irredeemable. And boy, it's so good. It's essentially where the Plutonian, who is Superman, just goes, okay, you know what? You psychos need somebody. You people need somebody to keep you in line. And so he goes apey and starts killing indiscriminately. And it's so good. I was reading, there's a thing... And I like Grant Morrison for this sort of thing. There was a thing recently, I'll close on this. There was a thing recently, people were quoting from this interview that Grant Morrison gave recently, and this is not a new thing for him, this is something I've heard him say before, but Morrison does not care for the darker superhero stuff. He's, especially now, like, he's not beyond writing dark stuff. His early stuff is all pretty, it's not dark, but I know that especially since he became DC, like a head guy at DC, he's like one of their tentpole writers and has been for at least 15 years. especially at that point, he was like, he wasn't really doing the weird Vertigo type stuff. He was doing straight ahead superheroes, very Grant Morrison-y, very quirky and very, can be difficult to follow here and there. But really I remember seeing him when he took over Batman, I want to say in 08, 09, somewhere in there, maybe somewhere in there, late aughts, early teens. And I saw him at Comic-Con, and he was just like, I just wanted to do a fun Batman book again. Because Batman has always been, like, very the Dark Knight, especially since Miller got a hold of him in the 80s. And Morrison was like, I'm going to bring back Aunt Harriet. He wanted it to be more. And to be honest, I didn't like it that much. I did for a while, but I kind of lost it after a while. Where was I again? Oh, right. So, but, I think he was talking about The Boys or something else where what I think he was really doing was calling out Mark Millar, because Mark Millar writes a lot of books like that, and Mark Millar and Grant Morrison do not like one another. But this is all to say that with Morrison, the dark superhero or the superhero that becomes like a fascist, when they extrapolate out. But Morrison's like, why couldn't it be the other way? Why can't superheroes extrapolate out to be the best of us? And I think that's generally what I believe in. I think, again, like I say, I think he's really more shitting on Millar and Ennis a little bit, although I don't know if those two... I know Morrison and Millar have had, like, actual problems with one another. They used to be friends, and now they're not. But I also get the very distinct impression that all of these UK writers don't like each other. In Morrison's book, he outright says he doesn't care for Alan Moore's work. I don't think Alan Moore likes anybody's work either. And Ennis doesn't seem to give a shit one way or the other. So these guys all seem... To me, when I was a kid, I thought they all hung out in the same pubs, because I didn't know that's what people did. But now they don't. So, saying all that I'm with Morrison, even that's how good Irredeemable is. That's how good The Boys is. Whenever I prefer superheroes that kind of show the best of humanity, which is weird because I have a very low opinion of humanity. But when somebody can do it right, when somebody's like Irredeemable, it was like doing dark stuff, not just for the sake of being dark, but like, it's an unfortunate aspect of humanity to be kind of cruel and mean, even if you're trying to do the right thing. And good, I've extended this 12-minute thing to almost 18 minutes. All right, well, have a nice night.